The air on planet Beerus did not simply grow heavy. It died. It was a sudden, suffocating extinction of the atmosphere, as if the very concept of breath had been erased from existence. Above, the eternal nebula that usually bathed the oracle fish's home in soft, divine light was gone, strangled by swirling clouds of absolute, vanta-black darkness. The ancient trees, which had stood since the dawn of this universe, did not burn, they withered instantly, turning to gray ash under the crushing weight of a pressure that felt less like power and more like a cosmic sin. In the center of this unnatural twilight stood Vegeta. But it was not the prince the gods knew. His roar was not a scream of effort, but a guttural vibration that shook the tectonic plates of the destroyer's world. A jagged, dark red aura, the color of dried arterial blood, erupted around him, tearing the fabric of space into weeping rifts. Whis, usually the embodiment of calm, moved faster than thought. His staff raised, his eyes narrowing for the first time in eons. He sought to tap the Saiyan's neck, to end the tantrum before it broke reality. But the angel's staff never landed. There was a wet, sickening sound, the sound of absolute invincibility striking fragile matter. Vegeta had not dodged. He had stepped into the space of the divine. His fist, wrapped in that corrosive crimson energy, was buried deep within Whis' chest, exiting through the angels back in a shower of glowing, pale blue ichor. Time seemed to freeze. In the background, Beerus, the god of destruction, stood paralyzed. His violet eyes were wide, dilated in a primal terror he had not felt since his creation. Sweat poured down the destroyer's face, not from heat, but from the cold realization that the hierarchy of the cosmos had just been brutally dismantled. Whis coughed, a splatter of divine blood staining Vegeta's glove, and collapsed. The prince didn't look down. He only looked forward, his eyes devoid of pupils, staring directly into the trembling soul of a god. Before the laws of the cosmos are rewritten in blood and the era of destruction gives way to the era of execution, align your energy with ours. Subscribe now, so this forbidden timeline is not lost to the void. The sound of the impact was not loud. It did not crack the planet in half, nor did it shatter the distant moons that orbited the destroyer's garden. It was a wet, suffocating thud, the grotesque noise of absolute density meeting divine fragility. It was the sound of a star dying in a library, a hushed, violent extinction that seemed to suck the audio from the air, leaving only a ringing silence that screamed louder than any explosion. Whis, the angel, the attendant, the being who existed in a state of permanent, autonomous perfection, looked down. His expression was not one of pain, but of profound, childlike confusion. The silver halo that hovered perpetually around his neck flickered violently, like a candle caught in a hurricane, before shattering into particles of dying light. He tried to speak, perhaps to correct Vegeta's form, perhaps to offer a final, witty admonishment, but his lungs were no longer whole. Instead, a gurgle of pale, glowing blue ichor spilled past his lips, splashing onto the pristine grass of the temple grounds, grass that was already turning gray and brittle under the radiation of Vegeta's aura. Vegeta stood motionless. His fist was buried up to the wrist in the angel's chest, right where the heart of a mortal would be. The Saiyan's eyes were blank, white voids, lacking pupils, lacking mercy, lacking even the familiar fire of princehood. This was not the royal blue of evolution. This was a corrupted crimson, a thick, sludge-like energy that did not flow like fire but dripped like oil. It was the forbidden God Killer state, a frequency of energy so blasphemous that the very atoms of the air seemed to recoil from his skin. Slowly, with a sickening squelch that echoed in the paralyzed mind of Lord Beerus, Vegeta withdrew his hand. Whis swayed. The staff of angels, the conduit of miracles that could rewind time and warp space, slipped from his loosening fingers. It struck the ground with a hollow clatter, a sound that signaled the end of an epoch. The angel fell to his knees first, his tall frame crumpling with a terrifying lack of grace, before tipping forward. He did not dissolve into light. He did not vanish. He simply died. A corpse of meat and bone, stripped of the divinity that had defined him for millions of years. 10 meters away, Beerus, the god of destruction, forgot how to breathe. Beerus had lived for millions of years. He had erased civilizations with a tap of his finger. He had slept through the rise and fall of galactic empires. He knew fear only as a concept he inflicted on others, a spice he added to the universe to give it flavor. But now, staring at the motionless body of his teacher, Beerus felt a cold, jagged spike of terror pierce his gut. It was a primal, mortal fear. The fear of a prey animal realizing the walls of the cage are locked. His violet eyes were wide, the pupils dilated to pinpricks. A bead of cold sweat, heavy and humiliating, rolled down his snout and dripped onto his gold collar. He wanted to scream, to summon the Hakai, to erase the insolent Saiyan where he stood, but his body betrayed him. His instincts, sharpened over eons of combat, were screaming a single, paralyzing command. Do not move. The ki radiating from Vegeta was not just strong, it was wrong. It felt like the antithesis of creation. If divine ki was water, calm, flowing, life-giving, this energy was acid. It felt heavy, smelling of ozone and old iron, pressing down on Beerus' shoulders with the weight of a collapsing galaxy. Vegeta turned. He did not pivot with a warrior snap. He rotated slowly, heavily, like a turret acquiring a new target. The dark red aura pulsed rhythmically, a heartbeat of malice. He looked at Beerus, and for a moment, the god of destruction saw something behind those blank white eyes. He didn't see the Saiyan he had bullied over pudding cups. He didn't see the warrior who chased Goku's shadow. He saw an executioner who had finally grown tired of the judge. He did not dodge. Vegeta spoke. The voice was unrecognizable, a grinding, distortion-heavy growl that sounded like two tectonic plates rubbing together. It was Vegeta's voice, but stripped of all humanity, layered with the echoes of something ancient and resentful. The body moves without thinking. That is the technique, is it not? But what happens, God of Destruction, when the intent to kill is faster than the instinct to survive? Beerus took a step back. The movement was involuntary, a flinch. He looked from Vegeta to the corpse of Whis, his mind struggling to process the impossible geometry of the situation. The angel was dead. The rewind was impossible. There was no do-over. The safety net that had hung beneath the universe since the dawn of time had been set on fire. You! Beerus' voice cracked, dry and brittle. What have you done, Saiyan? Do you have any idea the laws you have broken? The Grand Priest, he will do nothing, Vegeta interrupted, stepping over Whis' body as if it were nothing more than a fallen branch. The crimson aura flared, turning the sky above them a bruised, necrotic purple. The angels are bound by neutrality. They do not fight. They do not avenge. They only observe. And today, they observe the end of their relevance. Vegeta raised a hand, the glove stained with the glowing blue blood of the strongest being in Universe 7. He clenched it into a fist, and the air around it shattered like glass. Your teacher is gone, Beerus, Vegeta whispered, the sound carrying across the dying garden like a winter wind. Class is dismissed. The silence did not last. It was replaced by a low, vibrating hum that seemed to emanate from the marrow of the planet itself. It was the sound of rejection. Vegeta took a step forward, and the ground beneath his boot turned to black dust. The dark red ki that shrouded him was not merely an aura. It was a contagion. Unlike the serene, watery flow of Super Saiyan Blue, or the ethereal heat of Ultra Ego, this energy was thick, viscous, and hostile. It moved like living sludge, heavy with the weight of unmitigated sin. Where it touched the air, oxygen atoms unraveled. Where it touched the light, photons died. It was the forbidden frequency, a wavelength of power that existed in direct opposition to the divine. Do you feel it, Beerus? Vegeta asked, his head tilting to the side with a predator's curiosity. The white voids of his eyes bore into the destroyer. For years, you and your angel preached the doctrine of tranquility. You told me to clear my mind, to let my body move on its own, to emulate the gods. Vegeta raised his stained hand, examining the drying blue blood of Whis as if it were a fascinating specimen. But I am not a god. I am a Saiyan, and a Saiyan's power does not come from tranquility. It comes from the refusal to accept one's limits. It comes from the scream against the dying of the light. You tried to make me a stillness when I was born to be a storm. Beerus' shock finally fractured into rage. The paralysis of the previous moment shattered, replaced by the instinctive, roaring indignation of a deity who had been mocked in his own home. The god of destruction bared his fangs, his ears pinning back against his skull. The violet aura of destruction exploded around him, the familiar, terrifying power that had erased planets and civilizations for eons. It was a beautiful, terrifying purple, swirling with the orbs of pure annihilation, insolence. Beerus roared, his voice cracking the stone pillars around them. You think killing an angel makes you supreme? You are a monkey playing with matches in a library of gunpowder. I am the destroyer. I am the endpoint of all matter. Beerus thrust his hand forward, palm open. Hakai, the sphere of destruction energy, dense and purple, shot toward Vegeta. It was enough power to erase a galaxy, condensed into the size of a marble. It tore up the ground as it flew, a screaming projectile of absolute erasure. Vegeta did not move. He did not brace himself. He did not raise a guard. He simply exhaled. The breath left his lips as a cloud of crimson mist. As the Hakai sphere entered Vegeta's personal space, the domain of the God Killer, it didn't detonate. It didn't erase him. It began to rot. The brilliant purple sphere turned a sickly, bruised gray. It slowed, shuddered, and then dissolved into harmless sparks, like a firework doused in water. Beerus' jaw dropped, his hand still extended, trembling. The Hakai, the absolute decree of a god of destruction, had been neutralized, not by force, but by corruption. Your energy is based on authority, Vegeta explained, his voice devoid of arrogance, carrying only cold, hard facts. It works because the universe agrees that you are a god. It submits to your will. Vegeta began to walk toward him. The crimson aura flared, forming jagged, skeletal wings of energy behind his back. But this form, this God Killer state, it does not recognize your authority. It is the physical manifestation of heresy. It is the power of the mortal who looked at the heavens and decided they were empty. Beerus stumbled back, his boots slipping on the ash-covered grass. The pressure coming from Vegeta was causing his own God Ki to fluctuate, to flicker. It was a sensation he had never felt before his own divinity was being suppressed, suffocated by the density of Vegeta's malice. Impossible, Beerus whispered, the word tasting like copper in his mouth. You cannot simply negate destruction energy. That is the fundamental law of... Laws are for those who fear punishment. Vegeta interrupted, closing the distance. The heat from his body was scorching, blistering the skin on Beerus' face. I have no fear left, Beerus. I have buried my pride, my rivalry, and my hesitation. All that remains is the executioner. Vegeta stopped 3 feet from the god. He towered over the feline deity, the red lightning of his aura arcing out and striking the ground, leaving deep, scarred fissures. You have slept for too long, old cat, Vegeta said softly. You dreamed of a Super Saiyan god who would entertain you, but you should have had nightmares about the Saiyan who would replace you. Vegeta raised his hand again. The energy gathered there was not a sphere, but a blade, a flat, serrated construct of dark red light that hummed with a sound like a dentist drill. Draw your power, Beerus, Vegeta commanded, the distortion in his voice deepening into a demonic growl. Show me the full might of a destroyer, or die like a forgotten pet. Fear, sledgehammer blow to the spine that sent Beerus crashing through the planetary crust, burying him deep in the burning rock below. The impact shook the foundations of the temple. High above, inside the floating sanctuary of the oracle fish, the tremors became too much. The great glass bowl, which had held the seer of the universe for eons, developed a spiderweb crack. The oracle fish, sensing the end, swam frantically in circles. The prophecy! It squeaked, its voice thin and terrified. The timeline is dark! I see nothing! I see. Crack! The bowl shattered. Water and glass exploded outward. The oracle fish flopped onto the cold stone floor, gasping for air that was rapidly becoming toxic. There was no water to save it. There was no Whis to repair the bowl. The prophecy died. Not with a bang, but with a dry, gasping silence. Below, amidst the rubble, Beerus erupted from the crater. He was battered, bleeding purple blood from his mouth, his fur singed and smoking. But he was not done. He raised both hands high above his head. The sky turned black as he summoned the ultimate technique, a sphere of destruction so large it eclipsed the horizon. It was a sun of pure erasure, a swirling mass of violet doom that hummed with the song of the void. Cataclysmic orb, Beerus roared, hurling the massive sphere down at the tiny figure of the Saiyan. Vanish! The sphere descended, its gravity crushing the trees, the temple, the very air. It was an attack meant to wipe out the solar system. Vegeta looked up. The white voids of his eyes reflected the purple death approaching. He did not panic. He did not charge a beam. He simply raised his right hand, fingers stiff, forming a blade. The dark red ki surged, condensing around his hand until it looked like a jagged crystallization of blood. God splitter, Vegeta whispered. He slashed upward. It was a single, clean stroke. A vertical line of crimson energy bisected the world. It sliced through the air, through the gravity well, and straight through the center of Beerus' cataclysmic orb. The giant sphere of destruction split in half. The two hemispheres drifted apart, destabilized, and exploded harmlessly in the upper atmosphere, raining purple sparks down like a funeral confetti. Vegeta stood amidst the falling embers, untouched. Beerus hovered in the sky, his arms still outstretched, his chest heaving. He stared at his hands. He had used everything. He had tapped into the deepest reserves of his Hakaishin power, and it had been cut in half like a piece of paper. Slowly, the god of destruction lowered his arms. The violet aura flickered and died out, leaving him floating on nothing but physical stamina. He looked down at Vegeta, and for the first time in his life, Beerus felt the crushing weight of age. He felt old. He felt obsolete. Why? Beerus asked, his voice barely a whisper above the wind. Why has the universe granted you this power? Vegeta rose into the air, floating until he was eye level with the broken god. The crimson aura rippled calmly now, no longer raging, just waiting. The universe didn't grant me anything, Vegeta replied, his voice devoid of pity. I took it. While you slept, I suffered. While you ate, I bled. You ruled through fear, Beerus. I rule through pain. And pain is the only constant. Vegeta reached out and grabbed Beerus by the throat. The god was too exhausted to fight back. He dangled there, limp, staring into the white eyes of the monster he had helped create. Look at your kingdom, god of destruction, Vegeta said, gesturing with his free hand to the burning ruins of the planet below. The oracle fish was dead. Whis was dead. The hourglasses that measured the lifespans of worlds were shattered, their sands spilling into the void. It is already over, Vegeta said. I am just signing the death certificate. The neck of a god is no different from the neck of a mortal. It warms under the hand, it pulses with the rhythm of blood, and it breaks just as easily. Beerus did not struggle. The fight had left him, drained away into the fissures of his ruined planet. He hung in Vegeta's grip, his violet eyes dimming, staring past the Saiyan into the deep, starless void above. There was no rage left in the destroyer, only a profound, crushing fatigue. He looked like an old king who had finally been relieved of a crown too heavy for his head. Do it, Beerus rasped. His voice was a dry rattle, stripped of its divine echo. But know this, Saiyan. A universe without a destroyer is a garden without a weeder. It does not grow wild and free. It chokes. Vegeta did not blink. The crimson corrosive aura flared, traveling down his arm like liquid fire. Then let it choke. Vegeta said, I am not here to garden. I am here to pave. Vegeta clenched his fist. There was no explosion. The death of a god of destruction should have been a cosmic event, a tearing of the fabric of reality. But the God Killer form denied Beerus even that dignity. As the dark red energy flooded Beerus' body, the cat didn't explode, he eroded. Starting from the neck, Beerus' form turned to gray ash. The destruction energy within him was neutralized, eaten by the forbidden frequency. In seconds, the terrifying lord of the seventh universe, the being who had terrified Frieza and silenced Shenron, was nothing more than a handful of dust sifting through Vegeta's fingers. Vegeta opened his hand. The wind caught the ash and scattered it across the dead landscape, mixing the remains of the god with the soil of his destroyed home. Vegeta dropped to the ground. His boots crunched on the debris. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum so profound it made his ears ring. For the first time in his life, there was no ceiling. There was no one above him. Frieza was a memory. Beerus was dust. Whis was a corpse lying a few yards away, growing cold in the eternal twilight. The hierarchy that had defined Vegeta's existence, the ladder of power he had spent decades climbing, had not just been climbed, it had been kicked away. He stood alone at the summit of existence. But the summit was cold. The dark red ki pulsed against his skin, a parasitic rhythm. It was hungry. The God Killer form was not a transformation that ran on stamina. It ran on the self. To maintain the frequency that could kill angels, the form required a sacrifice of humanity. It needed to consume the things that made Vegeta mortal. Vegeta closed his eyes, trying to center himself, trying to find the anchor of his pride. He reached into his mind for the image that usually fueled his resolve. He looked for the woman with the blue hair. Bull. Ma. The name floated in his mind, but the face was gone. Where her smile should have been, there was only static, a blurred, gray smear in his memory. He tried to remember the sound of her voice, the way she yelled at him when he trained too long, the warmth of her hand. Nothing. Just the cold hum of the red energy. Panic, sharp and unfamiliar, spiked in his chest. He reached for another anchor. The boy with the sword, the boy with the lavender hair, Trunks. He saw the sword, clear as day. He saw the burning future, but the boy's face was blank. He couldn't remember the color of his eyes. He couldn't remember the feeling of pride he felt when the boy turned Super Saiyan. The emotional connection had been cauterized. The God Killer was eating his heart to fuel his fist. Vegeta opened his eyes. The white void stared out at the wasteland. He looked at his hands, hands that had held his infant daughter, hands that had held his dying wife in another timeline. Now, they looked like the claws of a demon, stained with divine blood and covered in the calloused armor of the executioner. I gave everything, Vegeta whispered to the silence. His voice was flat, devoid of the distortion now, sounding terrifyingly empty. I gave my rage. I gave my body. And now, I give my past. He looked over at Whis' body. The angel's skin had turned a dull gray, the blue tint fading as the cosmic energy dissipated. The staff lay nearby, its orb dark. A thought occurred to Vegeta, a logical, tactical thought. The Grand Priest, the father of angels. Surely, the death of a child would summon the father. Surely, the erasing of a destroyer would summon the king of all, Zeno. Vegeta waited. He stood on the precipice of the crater for an hour, then 2, then a day. The sky remained dark. The stars burned quietly in the distance, indifferent. No portal opened, no divine light descended, no judgment came. The realization hit Vegeta colder than the wind. The Grand Priest was not coming. The Xenos were not coming. The gods did not care. To the high cosmos, Universe 7 was just a petri dish that had developed a new mold. As long as the mold stayed in the dish, the scientists would not intervene. He was not a threat to be removed. He was a curiosity to be observed. Vegeta began to laugh. It started as a low rumble in his chest and grew into a dry, barking sound that echoed off the ruined cliffs. It was a laugh of absolute liberation and absolute despair. "They have abandoned us," Vegeta said, his voice gaining strength, hardening into iron. "Good." He turned his back on the ashes of Beerus. He turned his back on the corpse of Whis. He walked toward the ruins of the castle, where a single, high-backed stone chair remained intact amidst the rubble. The Prince of all Saiyans was dead. The God of Destruction was dead. Vegeta sat on the stone throne. The dark red ki flared up, solidifying into a mantle of crimson light around his shoulders. He rested his chin on his fist, staring out into the infinite black. "Let the multiverse know!" he whispered to the void. "The throne is occupied." The death of a god of destruction is not a solitary event. It is a severance. Across the vast, starlit expanse of Universe 7, in the sacred realm of the Supreme Kai, the consequences arrived instantly. Shin, the god of creation, was tending to the sacred grass when his chest suddenly seized. It was not a violent heart attack. It was simply the extinguishing of a flame. The life link, the ancient pact that bound the creator to the destroyer, snapped. Shin fell to his knees, clutching his robes, his eyes wide with a sudden, terrible understanding. He did not cry out. He simply faded, his body dissolving into golden motes of light that drifted upward into the ether. The old Kai, sitting nearby, sighed deeply, closing his eyes as he too began to vanish. There was no panic in their departure, only a mournful acceptance. Without a destroyer to prune the garden, the creator had no purpose. The balance was broken. Universe 7 was now a closed system, a world without renewal, without birth, ruled only by the one who had chosen to end it all. Back on the ruined planet, Vegeta felt the shift. He felt the sudden emptiness in the cosmic fabric where the Kais used to be. He knew what it meant. He had not just killed Beerus, he had sterilized the universe. No new stars would be born. No new life would be seeded. He was now the ruler of a dying kingdom, a custodian of the final chapter of history. He did not care. Vegeta sat on the stone throne he had salvaged from the rubble of Beerus Castle. The seat was cold, hard, and unforgiving, fitting for the new master of this domain. The God Killer form had settled. The raging, corrosive aura had retracted, soaking into his skin, turning his hair a permanent, deep crimson that looked black in the dim light. His skin was pale, etched with dark veins where the forbidden energy pulsed, keeping him in a state of perpetual agonizing power. He could not power down. To release the form now would be to die, for his mortal body had long since been consumed by the energy he wielded. He was no longer a Saiyan channeling power. He was the power holding a Saiyan shape. Far above, beyond the boundaries of the universe, the multiverse watched. In the palace of Zeno, the Grand Priest stood before the floating, scrying orbs. The images of Vegeta's victory played on the surface of the glass. The other angels, Vados, Whis' sister, Korn, Kuss watched in a silence that was heavy with unreadable emotion. They saw their brother's corpse lying in the grass. They saw the mortal who had defied the absolute law of their existence. "Father," Vados spoke, her voice devoid of its usual playfulness. "Universe 7 has deviated. The destroyer is gone. The angel is inactive. The balance is 0. Should we intervene?" The Grand Priest smiled. It was a small, chilling expression that did not reach his eyes. "Intervene? Why, Vados? The Saiyan has not threatened the other universes. He has not attacked the palace. He has simply evolved." The Grand Priest turned away from the orb, his hands clasped behind his back. A god of destruction is merely a title, a function. If a mortal has the will to execute the function better than the god, then the cosmos has corrected itself. We do not mourn the weak, Vados. We observe the strong. Let him sit on his throne. Let us see how long a mortal mind can endure the silence of eternity. The screen went dark. The decision was made. There would be no rescue. On the throne of ash, Vegeta waited. Days turned into weeks. Weeks bled into months. The concept of time began to dissolve. Without the oracle fish to mark the prophecies, without Whis to mark the training schedules, time was just a flat, endless plain. Vegeta sat motionless. He did not eat. The dark red key sustained him. He did not sleep. The energy would not let him. He merely watched the sky. He waited for Goku to arrive. He waited for Frieza to crawl out of some hellhole. He waited for the Xenos to erase him. But no one came. Goku, sensing the death of the Kais and the vanishing of Beerus' key, had likely understood. Or perhaps the sheer malice radiating from this sector of space kept even Kakarot away. The rivalry was over. There was no sport here, only execution. Slowly, the silence began to eat at him. Vegeta looked down at his hand. He tried to summon the image again. The blue hair, the smile, the woman who had built him a gravity chamber. He squeezed his eyes shut, forcing his mind to work, to dig through the corruption of the God Killer energy. Ma. He said the name aloud. Bulma. The sound fell dead in the air. It meant nothing. It was just a collection of sounds. He knew, intellectually, that she was his wife. He knew he had loved her. But the feeling of love, the chemical warmth, the protective instinct, the ache of separation was gone. The energy had cauterized it. He was a being of pure will now, and will has no room for attachment. A single tear leaked from his left eye. It was not clear water. It was red. It rolled down his cheek, burning a trail like acid, before dripping onto the armrest of the throne. "This is the summit," Vegeta whispered to the darkness. "This is what you wanted, isn't it? To be the strongest, to be uncatchable." He looked out at the horizon. The dark clouds that shrouded the planet had parted slightly, revealing the cosmos beyond. The stars of Universe 7 were dimming, one by one, as the lack of a creator caused the galaxies to slowly wind down. The universe was dying in sympathy with its new master. Vegeta leaned back against the cold stone. He placed his hands on the armrests, his fingers digging into the rock. He was the prince of all Saiyans. He was the God Killer. He was the celestial executioner. He was alone. And in that terrible, suffocating silence, Vegeta finally understood the truth that Beerus had known for millions of years. Power is not freedom. Power is a cage. And he had just locked himself inside the smallest, strongest cage in existence. He did not roar. He did not rage. He simply stared forward, his white, pupilless eyes reflecting the dying light of a galaxy that had forgotten how to hope. The stars burned quietly, as if remembering his will, terrified to blink, lest they attract the gaze of the king on the throne of ash.